right, well, let me catch you up with the last 3 years. 20 years was 3 years, 4 years ago. And in the meantime, some things have changed. I initially was transferred from Washington, D.C. back to Hollywood. And while in Hollywood, I made a proposition to Swami Sarvadevananda there about doing an experiment, a Vedanta experiment, of going and trying to create a center that doesn't present as any particular religion, a center that anyone could go to, and if someone came as a Christian, that we would teach them the Vedanta through Christian scripture. If they came as a Muslim, we'd go through the Sufi mystics and teach the Vedanta that way. And likewise, kind of taking away any barrier of entry, because it was always a concern, looking back on my own experience with finding Vedanta, that those first few years of kind of making my way through the forest of deities and traditions and rituals was quite a mountain for me, to coming from my training or background as a fundamentalist Christian, rather troublesome to find all of that. And I just felt, that there were people out there who are hungry for the knowledge of their own self, for a fulfilling life, who would not want to go into a temple, or wouldn't want to go into a shrine, or would feel intimidated by seeing another tradition. And I was also very much wanting to manifest what Swamiji had taught, which we'll go into, about making the divine our own, in whatever form is helpful to us, and to take those things that are our own and use them to dig deep in ourselves, taking our form of the divine, if we have a form, or our idea or our principle of the divine, and just finding fulfillment and inspiration in that. I like the idea of a very playful religion, because I see that in Sri Ramakrishna, I see that in Jesus, I see that in Buddha, just that freedom to be, and to really make the troubles secondary, to make the shortcomings meaningless, because after all, our value comes from the existence of God within, which is a given. That's our value as a person. That's what makes us beautiful and makes us worthy. It's that grace that we wear. And that really came home for me in my first few years in the monastery, because when I first started my meditation, oh my goodness, when I first started, I really started with just 2 minutes twice a day, because my guru told me to come up with something that I knew I could do and never miss. And at that point in my life, it was 2 minutes. And I held myself to that 2 minutes. I did that every morning. I would just sit in front of my little shrine, and on my shrine at that point, I didn't have any pictures. I had just a collection of things that somehow had sparked an idea of life, or sparked an idea of meaning. And I just arranged those on that little shrine, and I would just sit there and just think of God. I was quite defensive about religion. My tradition growing up was very fundamentalist, very calcified, very narrow, very judgmental. And I had left that early on. It broke my mind, actually, after a while, and I left religion. I thought I had left religion completely. I didn't see how any of that could be true. It seemed, to me at the time, just too small to live in. And so I went through a period of about 10 years of wandering and exploring the whole world, really, in kind of a search for what would make life meaningful, what would give it a purpose. It all started when, all this is by the way, anyway, that I started one night, coming home from the bars and sitting in my room and just feeling so alone and feeling so isolated, and just realizing that I was a parasite for pleasure, and seeing quite clearly as I sat there in my early 20s, looking at my life and thinking, this isn't sustainable. The things that give me pleasure now, the things that are really distracting me from my troubles, are taking such an energy, and it requires all the youth in me to maintain them. And I pictured myself, fortunately or unfortunately, I pictured myself at the age I'm at now, and realized at that age that I wasn't going to have that ability to be out all night, or to, that my body and my looks would fail me ultimately, and the demands of keeping things together would keep increasing. And I just looked around my room and realized that even in the years since college, when I was in college, I lived in a room off of a garage, and I looked at all the things that I had managed to collect in that almost 10 years that I'd been working. And I realized the only thing that had happened is that everything that I owned had gotten bigger, that I had actually not added anything to my life. It was just investing more in the things that I'd always had, and in the middle of that, I had not gotten bigger. I had not increased in my satisfaction or my inner peace or my joy. And I was very sad about that, because I sat there thinking, what if I keep going on this trajectory? By the end of life, I'll just have a giant house, a giant TV, a giant car, a giant stereo system, lots of friends perhaps, but that I myself would still be an island in the middle of that. And so 2 weeks later, after that, sitting on the edge of my bed, I had given myself permission to do whatever I thought necessary to find fulfillment. So I had sold everything, I quit my job, and got a backpack and a laptop, and just started wandering for about a year, looking under every rock and just following the whim of the moment. I started out in Prague, because I read an article in Smithsonian Magazine that was the place to be as an expatriate American. So I went and lived in Prague, and then winter came in Prague. You don't want to be in Prague in winter. You have 11 million people heating with coal, and the sky turns a dark gray, and you're living in medieval stone buildings, and everything is cold. So I left there and went to London to meet a friend that I had met on the way over. And we decided, he came home from work the third day I was staying with him, and he said, well, I did it. And I said, but what's that, Paul? And he said, well, I just liked what you're doing, so I thought I would join you. So I resigned today. And so where are we going? And so we decided that we would chase summer, since we were both tired of winter. And we decided on New Zealand. And we flew to New Zealand, and on the way, the plane refueled in Rarotonga, which is kind of like Neverland, a little volcano in the middle of a tiny little island. And I thought, I'm going to come back here at some point. And just that travel, I could go on for probably a couple of hours just talking about that, because Mother opened little doors of understanding as I went around, but the ultimate understanding of it that I learned in Rarotonga, actually, when I ended up going back there and sitting on this tiny island. There were about 10,000 people there. There was really no economy on the island. There was just 2 big hotels that were run by foreigners who complained of not being able to get any employees because there was no need. You had no place to spend money on the little island. Everybody lived in huts because it was tropical. They all lived on the beach, so they fished, and everybody had a little garden for, what's that plant that they grow? It's like a potato, but that was their subsistence. And I looked at that, and I saw 10,000 people who lived on this little tiny plot of land, who were never going to get the $1,500 together that was necessary to fly off the island. And I realized at that point that if the universe was fair, which I assumed it had to be, otherwise there would be no answers there. I assumed it was fair, and I thought, this is even a continuation of a futility, to go looking around the world for an answer, for a truth. So I ended up going back to my place in San Francisco, and just through a series of grace, really, finding answers, I realized that something had to be inside me that was fulfilling. The answers had to be within and not outside, because these people on this island couldn't travel very far to find their answers. And that's when I met a friend of mine named Philip, who was a Vedantist. And at first I was still very defensive. I didn't want anybody else's thing. I wanted my own answers, my own thing. And so the thing that Philip gave to me is that we shared a house, I shared an apartment in there for about 5 years. And in that 5 years, I saw him get up every morning in his room and go into his closet, literally a closet. And he had a little table in there with a picture of Ramakrishna, who I didn't know, just some old guy. And hanging on the wall of his room was this crazy woman, because I don't know if you've seen this picture. It's not a common picture of Holy Mother, but there's a picture of her where she's sitting in a covered wagon with a Radu on one side, and I can't remember who's on the other side. But this poster, in that picture, it's zoomed way out, so she's just a small character sitting on that in that wagon on the chair. But on this poster, they had zoomed all the way in and just gotten the headshot of Holy Mother. And I don't mean any disrespect. Mother knows that I laughed at her quite a few years there. But it was the strangest picture because Mother she's gone. She is completely lost in ecstasy. She's sitting slightly off center like this, and her eyes are not lined up. They're sort of slightly misaligned, and her hands are sitting in her lap, just in kind of just sort of a strange, something that would happen if you just were not present in your body, you just were somewhere else. And I used to marvel at that picture. I was like, there was something about it, you couldn't take your eyes off of it because you've never seen anybody look like that. And you knew something was happening, but you had no idea what was happening, but it was amazing. And just seeing those pictures, seeing Philip's devotion to those things, and the fact that as 5 years as roommates, he never felt the need to tell me anything, to correct me or to make a suggestion to me or to challenge me or nothing. He was perfectly content to have his thing, and it worked for him. And I thought, that's fascinating, because if I'd had a Christian roommate, he would have been hounding me every single day about every single thing in my life. And I thought, that's very interesting. So Philip had a bookshelf in his room of Vedanta books. And so I started sneaking them out one by one and reading them in secret and just being fascinated with everything that I read, because it kept giving me this sensation that somebody had gone into my own mind and picked out all of my aha moments that I had had in my life, organized them, outlined them, wrote an essay, and handed it back to me. And I thought, this is a fascinating feeling to read these things and somehow know that I know them, to somehow feel like these are already here. These are already in me. I just never knew how to say it or how to give an expression to it, or even to identify it as a thing that was already existing. So that is what woke me up to the Vedanta, and ultimately I went to India in '99. I met Prabhrajika Moksha Prana at Sharada Math through a series of coincidences, and just was so impacted by just 10 minutes, really just in her presence. And I had an experience there that I couldn't explain, that I had never imagined was a possibility and really didn't know what to do with. And in that 10 minutes with her, just inexplicably, I found an inspiration. So I went from being this confused seeker, I guess, to joining the monastery when I got back from that trip. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what a monk was, really. I just knew that these 5 sadhus that I met on that 6-week trip through India, those sages and mountain folks that I met, and the nuns, each one of them, 5 of them in particular, each one of them gave me a piece of my puzzle. And at the end of that trip, the last day I was there, I was walking with Philip through the jungle of Rishikesh after we had just been sitting with a wandering monk who lived in a rich man's kutir on the bank of the river, and we would go and hear him chant every day. And I didn't know what he was chanting. I didn't even know what language it was. oh God, there's so much to this story. I just never know where to stop. But I would sit down. He invited us into his little kutir after making us dip in the Ganges. All of this with pointing because he spoke no English at all. And we sat in his room and he would just begin chanting. And as he would chant, he would begin to rock. And the tears would begin to stream down the corners of his eyes. And his smile just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just sat there thinking, he's going to swallow his face if he smiles any more than he is. And I sat there and I remember after the first day walking out of there and turning to my friend Philip and saying, Philip, I said, my whole life has been a waste. I said, I look at this man. All he owns is this little piece of rag around his waist. You know, he lives in an empty little mud hut in the woods that belongs to a rich man who brings one bowl of food to him every day. That's everything. And he experiences more joy in half an hour of chanting than I have ever even seen in my life. And that was the final, the final piece. And I knew that I would spend the rest of my life trying to uncover what he had found. And through Moksha Prana and these two sadhus in Mayavati that I had met, and this man in Rishikesh, and then Swami Prabhutananda, that because of the little pieces each one of them had given me, I knew where to begin digging. And so I moved back to San Francisco and moved into the monastery in San Francisco. And a year later, they wouldn't let me into the monastery at first because I didn't know anything or anyone. And they were kind of concerned that it would just be a flash in the pan. So they let me move into the guest house for the first year. And I nagged them so much that after 9 months they let me move up into the monastery. And it's just gone on since then. More struggle and strife than I had ever anticipated. I never realized that such a seemingly simple decision would impact me so deeply and just literally rip out huge sections of my mind and challenge everything in my heart. And then put me back together slowly, one piece at a time, and to bring me to 2012 when I got to take my vows in Bellarmont. And so that was 2012, so 12 years ago, 24, yeah. So 12 years I've been a Swami, and I'm not an academic, you know, I'm very much a bhakta. So I'm just wandering through this life, trying to learn my dance steps, to have really the most fun, the most meaning, and to learn to be the world's greatest lover, which is how I describe religion to me. And of late, in the last 2 years, this experiment that we're doing in Colorado is to remove the idea of religion completely. I find it to be unnecessary. Because life is religion. We are already what we seek. So there's nothing to learn, nothing to acquire, nothing to achieve, nothing to build. It's a matter of letting go of all the wrong thinking that you have created or collected, because we have always felt the pain of our separation. We have always felt the pain of our unknowing. And the only reason we become worldly, the only reason we become, big quote, sinners, is to try and deal with that pain, trying to get away from that hurt of not knowing, that fear of being wrong, being impure, being incomplete. Whatever it is that broke that connection very early on in us, we've been trying to fix that. And we've created refuges, you know. When you're lonely, you call a friend. When you're depressed, you have a beer. When you need to just be taken away, you go to the movies. And you have all these places that you're hiding out of fear, out of suffering, just trying to find a moment's peace in this world. And all of that was unnecessary, because the love that we were seeking comes from behind our ego, comes from behind our mind, and it's infinite. It's overwhelming, and it's completely trustworthy. It has never left us. We have this wrong idea of having to find God, but we have to unfind ourselves, because it's only our egoism, only our sense of separation, only the assumption that we have to find or get or add something. That is the reason, in the words of Sri Nisargadatta, do you not realize it is your quest for happiness itself that prevents you from being happy? And why and how can the quest for happiness prevent it? Because to start your quest for happiness, you have to make the first wrong assumption, and that is that you don't have it. And that is the only reason we require faith in the beginning. Faith is really just a training wheel. You know, those extra wheels you put on your bicycle so you don't fall over. And in the beginning, these truths are incredible to us. We think, what, everything is one without a second? How can that possibly be? You know, I'm eternal, I'm never going to die, I've never been born. What is that? I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. For crying out loud, what else could I be? You know, all those things, because we've just become accustomed to wrong thinking, those things seem incredible. And so then we approach our religion as if we have to build something, or we have to achieve something, we have to do something. And really all you have to do is stop doing, stop achieving, stop searching, and accept the grace which is necessary, because otherwise, without grace, you can't free yourself from your own mind. Your mind won't let you feel free. Your mind is where your karma is carried. And God does not carry your karma. God is not watching you and keeping a list of your wrongs. You know, from the Christian scriptures we know that, because 1 Corinthians 13, which we'll talk about in, I think, the third lecture, the description of love. Love keeps no record of wrongs. And I read that and I thought, well, love and God are the same, according to 1 John. So my idea that God is keeping a record of my wrongs, as I had been taught very keenly for my first 20 years of life, turned out to be utterly false. That it is my own mind that keeps a record of wrongs, and it is my own mind that holds me captive inside. And that there's only two ways out of that: a complete renunciation and a complete denouncement and a perfect life following that, or grace through faith. That you just sit there and for some strange reason assume fundamentally that your worthiness is separate from your doership, separate from your activity, and completely dependent on your nature of this divine love. And that our wrestling with that is what teaches us about the nature of what we're calling God at the moment. This notion of something separate from us that is perfect, which turns out to be what you are when you let go of the notion of being separate, when you let go of the notion of being other, and surrender to the silence of mind, where you no longer live from the outside in, but you begin to live from the inside out. Oh my goodness, I've already gone almost an hour and I haven't even started. That's kind of my nature, sorry about that. So I'm going to start here with some things that Ramakrishna says, and then some things that Vivekananda says about religion. Because I would like very much to give you the idea that your life as itself is religion, and that this moment is the only moment, right? We have only experienced a singular moment, and it has no beginning and it has no end. It's the isness of being. Ironically, it's the I am. And ironically, that's the very first name in the Christian Bible that God gives himself. You know, when Moses asks, "Who shall I say sent me to you know," because God tells him, go to Pharaoh and ask him to release his 3 million slaves. And can you just imagine if that was your commandment? Go talk to the head guy and just tell him to let go of his 3 million slaves. I just see Moses like, all right, who shall I say sent me? You know, by what authority am I going to have the Pharaoh let go of 3 million slaves? And God says, I am. Tell him that I am has sent you. And so I saw that, and I put that together with this idea of this moment, that it is eternal, never ends, never begins, that this moment is the I am. And this moment is your guarantee that God will and has never left you, because you have never been anywhere else or in the care of anything else but this present moment. And that in meditation you just try and lay down everything to become aware of this embrace, this unending embrace. And the sages say that if you do that and you sit there long enough and you get quiet enough inside, you come to realize that the nature of this moment is the nature of God, and that nature is Chidbramhananda. It's an unconditioned love that has no boundaries, that it's an unconditioned and infinite wisdom that has no boundaries, and that it is the very sense of being, the greatest gift of all, which is your love letter that you cannot separate from, that God is eternally present to you in this moment. And this moment is what we're trying to learn and trying to know and trying to embrace and trying to accept. And this moment is most easily read through awareness, through presence. This moment, all of the scriptures are a crystallization of this moment. The Bible was written in this moment, the Quran was written in this moment, the Vedas are this moment. And one of the first statements here, Vivekananda says to him, all that is true is Veda, and by the Vedas, he says, no books are meant. They mean the accumulated treasury of spiritual laws discovered by different persons in different times. Incidentally, he discloses his conception of the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion. From the high spiritual flights of the Vedanta philosophy, of which the latest discoveries of science seem like echoes, to the lowest ideas of idolatry with its multifarious mythology, the agnosticism of the Buddhists, the atheism of the Jains, each and all have a place in this Sanatana Dharma. And of this Indian mother church, according to him, the distinctive doctrine is that the Ishta Devata, the right of each soul to choose its own path and to seek its own God in its own way. No army, then, carries the banner of so wide an empire as that of Hinduism, thus defined. For as her spiritual goal is the finding of God, even so is her spiritual rule the perfect freedom of every soul to be itself. Ramakrishna says, while he was talking to Bhagavan Das about this same eternal religion, or this same Sanatana Dharma, the religion of the rishis has been in existence from time out of mind and will exist eternally. There exist in this Sanatana Dharma all forms of worship. Worship of God with form, worship of the impersonal deity, as well it contains all the paths of knowledge, the path of devotion, and so on. And what does Vedanta teach us? In the first place, it teaches it that you need not even go out of yourself to know what is true. All the past and all of the future are here in the present. No man ever saw the past. Did any of you see the past? When you think you are knowing the past, you only imagine the past in the present moment. You see the future. Would you bring it down to the present, which is the only reality? The rest is imagination. This present is all that there is. There is only the one, and all is right here, right now. One moment in infinite time is quite as complete as the all-inclusive as every other moment. All that is and was and will be is here in this present. Let anybody try to imagine anything outside of it, and he will not succeed. What religion can paint a heaven which is not like this earth? And it is all art. Only this art is being made known to us gradually. We, with 5 senses, look upon this world and find it gross, having color, form, sound, and the like. Suppose I develop an electric sense, everything would change. Suppose my senses grow even finer, you will all appear to be changed. If I change, you change. If I go beyond the power of the senses, you will appear as the Spirit and God. Things are not what they seem. We shall understand this by and by, and then we shall see it. All the heavens, everything, are here, are now, and they really are nothing but the appearances of the divine presence. So this moment is all. It is everything. And it changes the nature of our sitting, the nature of our meditation, the nature of our practice. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a wonderful book called You Are Here. And in there he says, we do not sit to realize God. We sit to realize that we are already realized. That within you, this is so much fun, within you, you have both. You have Shiva and Shakti within you. There is already fully developed within you the world of change, the world that is constantly repeating, non-repeating, introduction of difference, constantly going on. And that is in the mind, that is in the brain. And that's where most of us have placed our identity. And that's why we experience, that's why we seek safety in an ego. We try to create a non-changing sense of self within this sea of constant change. But also within you, behind the mind, almost a secret, is the heart. And in that heart is absolute silence, no thought. No thought occurs there. And as soon as thinking stops, you understand that time belongs to the mind, because time is only a measurement of the rate of change, and all change is only thinking. You see, this mind has created your universe. This mind is everything that you know, right? We assume there's an external world. You cannot prove that there's an external world. Everything that you're seeing and experiencing at this moment, including me in this room and all the words you're hearing, are only in your mind, right? You say, no, I see you sitting over there and you're talking and it's hitting my ear. You don't know any of that. Because what you're seeing is the light of consciousness. It's not the light of the sun. This room is not lit for us by the light of the sun. You say, well, that sounds crazy. But think. This light hits your eyes. Your brain is in a dark box that has never seen light in its whole experience of life, has never seen a single ray of the sun. That light hits your eyes. It doesn't go to the brain through some optical connection. It gets translated. It gets translated into sensory information. Maybe zeros and ones like a computer, who knows? But it ceases to be light at the back of your eye and becomes nerve information. And that nerve information goes to your brain. And your brain takes this encoded information, having never seen light, having no idea of its existence or what it looks like, and it has created for you a symbol of light. So when you look at the light outside, or you look at a light bulb, if we have one on, you're not seeing a light bulb with light. You're seeing your mind's symbol for what it is called a light bulb, emitting what it has called and come to know as light. Right? And so what you're seeing is your mind's symbol for a light. And you say, oh, but it comes in through my eyes. Think again. Because your eye is as much as a symbol for the source of light as the light bulb, as the light that you're seeing. And you say, oh, but it illumines everything. I can see everything. I said, but it hasn't illumined anything. Think of when you dream at night. You go to sleep in a dark room, you close your eyes, pull your blanket up, and you dream of a world full of sunlight that shows you all of your thoughts, all of your experiences. Everything is right there in front of you. There's no light in there. Your head's not glowing in bed. It is the light of consciousness alone that allows us to see. The light of God, the light of the presence that lights up all of your senses. Everything else is a narrative created by your mind to explain it all. And that explanation is arbitrary. It's an explanation of convenience, to give you a false sense of security, to make you comfortable in your assumed smallness. to give you a comfort in your assumed limitations and restrictions. Swamiji says that your personality, your experience of yourself, that it's merely a collection of limitations and restrictions, nothing more. It's your way of dealing with not knowing, nothing more. And that's why we have to let go of it, because it has become a refuge for us. And the more you take refuge in it, the more brittle you become, the more angry you become, the more afraid you become. And we see in this modern world it's becoming a significant problem again, because we begin drawing boundaries. We begin trying to find a safety in the physicality, and there is no safety in physicality. There is no safety in smallness, in limitation. And so we continue to make our world tighter and tighter and more defined. We become more and more afraid of things of difference. And we start to try and maintain a place of peace and tranquility where there is no peace and tranquility, because it's not available in this ego which we've created to call ourselves. Right? This ego that has restricted us. Egoism and Maya are synonyms. They're synonyms until you get to the beginning, because actually Maya creates ego. So at the beginning they're not synonyms, but after ego is created, Maya and ego are the same thing. It is because of your world of limitation that you've created that you can't see what's behind it. It is the veil of Maya. And the way out is to reduce that as much as possible. Of course, Swami Ramakrishna says to us, you can't get rid of that thing. It's like a willow tree. It's like you cut that thing down and the next morning there'll be a new shoot coming up from it. So you can't totally efface yourself of it, but if you can minimize it, it can become like a window, so that you get a first-hand experience of your divinity, of God. As you have that first meditation where you've minimized thought, maybe gotten almost a full second of silence, that's enough room for God to teach you a library of information. If you can just get that, shoot for that 1 second of no thought, in that 1 second you'll become aware of the disappearance of time. You become aware of a sense of no boundary. Sri Nisargadatta in his book, I Am That, makes a very interesting point. He says that, oh goodness, this has started to happen in my mind, or it just goes silent and I can't keep a thought happening. But that in that silence, in that lack of definition, in that moment, you become aware of an infinity, because the difference between you and a sinner is that sinners describe themselves from the outside in. A deluded person, let's use that word. A deluded person sees himself from the outside in. Isn't that what we all do? The best way to find that out is to write a dating app, or get on one of these dating apps and write your little paragraph of descriptions. How are you going to start? Oh, I'm 60 years old, I'm a man, and I've got this color hair, and I'm this tall, and I'm definitely not fat. And I'm the person for you, I'm a nice guy, I enjoy walks on the beach, we go from the outside in, right? There's a good reason for that. Because God has no attributes, and you are that. And so if you start describing yourself from the inside out immediately, all you can say is, well, I'm pretty infinite. It's pretty quiet in there. I don't really know. I seem to be able to manage any situation. All these things. And so it's learning to see yourself from the inside out instead of from the outside in. In the story of the Garden of Eden, this is how the whole shebang started. Not because of the physical story of it, but because of what's trying to be described in that story. It is the formation of ego. Ego is the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And when Eve was presented with that tree in the garden, she went through a 3-step process to acquire her delusion. The number one thing, she looked at that fruit and she saw that it was beautiful. So we come into our senses and we look and we're like, oh, this is beautiful. That big house over there, that's beautiful. And then the second thought, it looked like it would be good for food, she says. It looked like it would be something you should take, something that you should make a part of yourself. And why? The third and final step, she thought that it would make her like God, that it would give her a sense of peace, a sense of fulfillment, a sense of being. So she takes and eats the fruit. And the first thing that happens, twofold, she feels an insecurity. Instantly she sees that she's naked, right? And Adam's with her at the time. They both realize they're naked, so they run to cover themselves. And then they hear God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hide. Why? Because they have that sense of smallness, that sense of impurity, that sense of not being enough, the sense of having done something wrong. And so they run and hide from love itself. They run and hide. What a strange thing to do. And so this is the process that is a looping reality. The story of the Garden of Eden is not something that happened once at the beginning. Sri Nisargadatta says this world is recreated afresh every moment by you. And it's because of this looping story of the Garden of Eden that we are addicted to. We've placed our identity of ourself in the senses. And we look out and we think, this is beautiful. This looks like something I should eat or consume or take. And in that, somehow I'll find my happiness. I'll become like God. I'll be secure. I'll be eternal. I'll be happy. And so we eat, and then we're confused because we've become afraid. We've become insecure. We've become lonely and small. Right? And so we start looking, and what is the curse of the garden? That's the curse of the garden. You know, we often think that God is some big mean guy that curses them. Because you disobeyed me, you've done. It has nothing to do with it. This is the normal fruit of wrong thinking. That if you place yourself in the senses and go through to this outside beautiful world to find your fulfillment, you will have to toil all the days of your life for the constant flow of desires that produces, because you're farming a world of the temporary, the temporal, and everything that you manage to acquire slowly goes through your fingers. That beautiful Mercedes that you saved up and got gets its first scratch on the door, and then your kid spills a Coke in the back seat, and then before too long, it's not satisfying anymore, but thank goodness Audi is there to save you with their newest and latest and greatest. And the process just continues on. So you run continually to try and recapture what you've already captured because it dies and goes away. And you're left at the end of the day sitting on your bed after stumbling home from the bars, wondering, why is everything in my life bigger? And why am I just alone in the middle of it, unfulfilled, trying to find meaning? When I've done so much and played all the rules properly, I got my degree, I did my homework, I behaved myself, I got married, and I controlled myself, and I did everything I was supposed to do. But here I am. And so this is religion. And the way to read the scriptures of this moment is awareness. Just become aware of everything simultaneously. Pay attention. What happens when you grab? What happens when you take? What do your activities and the things that you're running for, what do they leave you with? Be very discerning. That's what's meant by that discernment. And as you pay attention to the fact that all of this is make-believe and doesn't last, because all of this, as at the end of the day, is nothing more than a thought. This creation, this room is only a thought and exists as only a thought in your mind. And so all of this change and all of this material isn't even that. It's just a state of mind. Unfortunately, you come to the final truth. You are not this mind. You're just observing. You're not this body. You're not growing old. You're not sick. You are this infinite, eternal observer that has no boundary, no need, no lack of peace, no lack of love, and you're finished. And you accept it by the gift of grace and the gift of love. Did I make it to 11? 11. So we got 40 minutes for questions. Or thoughts, or corrections. Or, I'm only gone a third of my references. If you want me just to keep going, I can also keep just going.
So a big question that arises to me, as I hear this, is are there methodologies, and then you come back to religion, because religion is methodology, to take something that has such a high realized, potential realization, and somehow execute it so you delayer the mind to be able to see all the stuff that you're talking about? Doesn't it then come back to religion and to methodology?
Religion is there because it's helpful, but religion is not the answer. It just points at the answers in all of that. But the first thing about that, what we're trying to do seems very difficult only because we've got the wrong attitude about it. Because we immediately do exactly what you described there. We place it out as this high thing that we can't accomplish and do, which is an entirely wrong framing of the problem. And so it becomes true because you believe it, becomes true because you framed it that way. How can being you be difficult? That's all we're trying to do. To be authentically ourselves, to stop being what our mind is telling us we are, to stop being what the senses are describing us as, but to be what we are when nothing is telling us. That's why this silence of the mind is so important. Your mind, the ego, is very interested in boundaries. Why? Because it doesn't exist. Ramakrishna says at one point, I went and looked for my ego. He says, I tell you truthfully, there is nothing there. It's like peeling an onion. You just keep peeling and peeling, and when you get to the center, you find there's no onion there. It was all skin. And so this is the whole process. Stories are very vital to the ego, but they are poison to the soul. So when you find yourself saying, oh, this is so difficult, you've just created a story that you will have to live through. Right? You've said this is difficult, and so difficult it will be for you. Oh, I'm so impure. You've created a story, and you're going to have to live that story. That's what karma is. Karma is all the stories that ego tells you. And when you define them that way, you condemn yourself to that experience. That's why the point is, don't say things like, oh, I'm so impure. Oh, this is so hard. Oh, my mind is so noisy. As if that matters. You're not the mind. Let the mind be noisy. What keeps it noisy is your interest in it. If you're interested in the mind, it makes noise. And the mind itself, in its natural state, is silent. There's no thought in it. It's calm and peaceful. It's like Ramakrishna says, pure mind and God are one. Pure mind is Brahman. Right? So in this moment, if you can just silence the mind, all of this becomes apparent. You don't have to learn anything. All that you need to know is within you. But you can't hear it because you've got the radio of the ego turned up too loud. You're letting the mind tell you what you are. You're letting the body describe you. And you're paying very close attention to it. As soon as you get that volume turned down, which is the best we can do, some of the sages have attained absolute silence in there. But that's a very difficult thing to do, and it's not necessary. Just get it low enough. Try to get enough silence just in a meditation, in a sitting. And even if you can get even less than a second of that, just a moment of no noise, an infinity of information is available to you that you know naturally. right? The knowledge that we're seeking is not a referential, relational knowledge of the mind. So we don't need to go pick up a book, we don't need to go listen to Swami C, talk about his life experience. It's already there in its entirety, but it's not referential. And what does that mean? It means that it's spontaneously available to you as you need it. That's why the best way to learn spiritual life is to sit in silence, because then you become aware of what you are when nothing's telling you. You become aware of what you are in the moment, and you come to realize you are the moment, that it's because of your awareness that all of this happened in the first place, and this isness. So get rid of your stories. So when you sit, don't try to acquire, don't try to accomplish, try to let it be. Try to let your realization show itself to you. There's nothing that needs to be done. You are already you. And you by nature are Chidbramhananda. Without mind, without ego, you would naturally be a Buddha. You would naturally be a Jesus, a Rama, or a Krishna. That's what you are when you're not letting your ego define you, when you're not letting your body tell you what you need and what you want. You find that you as yourself before mind have no need. You're not in time. There are no stories. There are no descriptions. It's a matter of letting go and realizing that all that you need has always been available, has always been present. You just stepped out of the shrine of the heart and moved your sense of identity over 3 inches maybe into a mind, into the world of change, and you've been fascinated and distracted ever since. So now you have to let go of the change, let go of the stories, let go of the necessities that the ego has defined for you to be safe, and step back over maybe a distance of 3 inches, who knows. Step out of the mind into the realized self, that heart, the shrine of the heart that St. John talks about, St. Teresa of Avila talks about, every spiritual mystic has talked about. Step into the mind, into the heart, out of the mind, and become the observer. And from this place of knowing, this place that will teach you of your immortality, that will teach you of timelessness, that will teach you of unconditioned love, that will teach you that there are no boundaries, there are no separations, there are no categories. Sit in that place and watch the world of change, and you'll find the laughter of God. You'll find why Ramakrishna would call this a play, because it is the tumbling clowns in the world, making up reasons, making up problems, making up solutions, but always busy. Did I get anywhere near an answer?
So, Angie, do you still go on with bhakta exercises and prayers in your own life? I mean, yes, devotional activities towards Ramakrishna and Jesus, or is it either that, as you just mentioned, you focused on just being and being conscious of what's happening, etc.?
There's no dichotomy there.
Mm.
Jnana and bhakti come to the same end, and our experience of them, when you come to that, and that close to the end, which I'm just going to conjecture, yes, love is the nature of the universe. If you're a jnani and you don't want to place it outside of yourself and you want to go only inside, it's the same thing. The jnani is just saying everything is God, right? And the bhakta is saying God is everything. The same statement, just a different approach, a matter of approach. And so when you get there, you're in no ego. You are the love that you're feeling, which takes you to the heights of ecstasy. We see that in Ramakrishna, where just this moment alone with nothing else is enough to put him in the highest ecstasies, to where he literally is not the body, literally is not the mind. And as soon as you come down to a sense of ego, immediately he saw the mother. Not because the mother disappears, but because you disappear. So that's the first thing I tell, because Americans in particular love jnana, because they have this idea that it gets rid of the problem of God. Finally get rid of that pesky mosquito of God. But it's not God that disappears in jnana, right? It's you that disappears in jnana. And so in that experience of the moment, very rarely do you actually, probably never for most of us, do you actually fully disappear. But that veil gets so thin that you can't tell the difference. You're so close and feeling such an overwhelming sense of wholeness, sense of oneness, sense of being. But as soon as you form an idea about it, you're already in ego space. But that first idea is going to be, what love, what wisdom, what existence. You're such Ananda. Or you can go from the other direction. The last thing you scream before you dissolve into absolute oneness is, what love, what wisdom, what is this? After that, can't be talked about. Because there's no senses, no separation, no qualities, no reference, no relativity. You are at the absolute, that point from which everything else has been measured. Like that. And the temptation is, as we talk about these things, to think, I wish I could have that experience. And the story begins. You go home, you think, I'll meditate more. I'll stop drinking coffee. All of those things, when really all you have to do is, I accept that. Sri Nisargadatta is asked by an American guy, actually, who's sitting there listening to him talk. And Sri Nisargadatta, the devotee asks him, the guy says, we're sitting here in the same room, you're sitting there, I'm sitting here, we both do spiritual practice and stuff. He says, what's the difference between you and me? How come I can't see everything you talk about? And you seem to be so very comfortable in the middle of it. And Sri Nisargadatta says, there's really only one difference. He says, when my teacher whispered in my ear that I am that, I believed him. You assumed you had something else to do. That's the only difference. And so when you sit for meditation and your ego starts with its story, quiet, stop, no, careful, no. Your teacher said, the scriptures say, all these different things. Instead of listening to the story, submitting yourself to a narrative, meet it, look and find out where it's coming from. That's the mind. I'm not the mind. What does it have to do with me? I'm not wrapped up in what the guy down the street is thinking. Why am I wrapped up in what this is thinking? Just say, I'm not the mind. And let it rattle on. Let it present and define one problem after another. All thoughts arise from emptiness, exist for a moment. And if you don't identify with them, if you don't say, that's my thought, that's my desire, that's my idea, if you don't say anything, it will just fall back into emptiness again and leave you untouched, undisturbed. But if it arises and you look at it, I want ice cream. It's not just the mind saying ice cream, I want ice cream. Well, then you're pulled in. And then you're stuck. You're caught in mind. You've defined yourself by what the mind is telling you about yourself. And the mind can only create things that are bound by time, space, and causation. Your mind can only give you things that have the triad, subject-object relationship. Right? But in realization, they say that triad becomes a singularity because you are all of it. That's why you don't need anything.
One thing I can ask here, sufferings, I mean, those will come again and again. How do you how can we think that our body is suffering and I am not suffering, right? That is not so easy. Like, I can leave everything what is happening behind us or around us, but the sufferings will follow me someday or other, some way or other. So how can we think about it? To let it go and let me suffer, or how will you think about it?
Yes. Well, what you're betraying there is our confusion that we're the body, and so by believing that, we're affected by what happens to the body. But you look at Ramakrishna. He's laying on his deathbed. He's literally a week or two away from dying from throat cancer. And he becomes aware that his young disciples are going out to bathe in the pond. And he sees in his mind's eye that there's a cobra that lives at the base of that tree, and that these boys are heading toward it. So suddenly Holy Mother says that she sees Ramakrishna jump out of bed, run down the stairs, run all the way over to the ghat, to the pond, tells the snake, go away, the boys are coming here. The snake goes away. Ramakrishna runs back in and gets back into the business of dying. So he demonstrates to us, it's a choice, it's an identity. So how do we start it? This is the thing, there is some validity to the difficulty of religion, but it's not in a matter of acquiring, it's a matter of de-acquiring, and that's what's difficult. And so we have the work of religion is to break the hypnotization of our identity with body-mind. And the best way to do that I've found so far is when you have first of all, awareness. You can't do anything without being aware. You have to stop the assuming. You have to stop these moments of automaton, where you're just cruising along, assuming everything. You can't assume anything. Watch the mind constantly. You have to see these things. All of these truths exist in your internal world. The external world is just going to give you what you already believe about yourself within. You are that. And so the universe is your servant. And if you say, I'm just a small part, separate and apart from the whole universe, everything out there is going to look at each other and be like, oh my God, he thinks he's separate from us. Okay, quick, you go over there. Okay, you do this. All right, you do that. The universe has to support your idea of what you are, because you are that. And so if you believe you're the body, the world will organize and show you that you are the body, right? So you can't learn from the external world. It's just a mirror of what you are demanding of it from inside. So you have to go in, spend a lot of time, and this is why we meditate, observing the internal world and becoming aware at a minute level of everything that's going on in there. And once you do that, you come to understand a few things. Anytime you feel a desire, first you have to become aware, oh, it's a desire. You can't just assume, oh, I want ice cream, and go get ice cream. You have to feel that initial thing. Like I always tell them my pizza story. I've told it so many times. People always bring me pizza thinking it's the only thing I eat. But in this pizza story, I just joined the monastery. I do love pizza, by the way, but in this story, that's something I learned once I became a Swami. You have to be careful about what you say. If you say that you like chocolate cookies for the rest of life, you're only going to get chocolate cookies. But in my first year in the monastery, I was walking on Polk Street in San Francisco, and I was having a wonderful time. I was in San Francisco, a beautiful city. It was a gorgeous day in the spring. I was a monk. It was brand new. I was full of excitement about what my life was about, where I was going. I was walking along, so enjoying everything. The world was perfect. And I got to the corner of what is it, Broadway and Polk, I think. There's a Escape from New York pizza joint right there. And suddenly I smelled, cooking pepperoni pizza. And I was like, oh, pizza, right? Now, if I was a good monk, I would have had a perfect day with the smell of pizza in it. How could it get better than that, and just gone on my way. But because I had some attachments, some memories, right? So what happens, you smell, the senses present something to you, and you identify with it. Oh, pizza. And then a memory comes up. Oh, I like pizza. I've had pepperoni pizza. I really enjoy that. So that memory comes up, and then other memories around pizza comes up. right? And now you're in a state of mind where you forget that the day was perfect. I have to make the day perfect now by getting myself a piece of pepperoni pizza. But I got a problem. I'm a monk. I don't have any money to buy a piece of pizza. I can only stand here and smell it. What a misery. I'm stuck forever in this horrible state. But then I remembered, oh my gosh, Swami gave me $20 for Christmas in my Christmas card. And it's sitting in my drawer back at the monastery. So what has happened, right? In the moment, the day is perfect. You realize this moment contains everything. I'm fine. It's wonderful. Then the senses present something to you, right? And you attach to it. What does attachment mean? You assume that it's your experience of smelling pizza. And as soon as that happens, the mind says, the self is thinking about pizza or wants pizza. And so the mind brings up all the memories, all the samskaras, and they come up. And now the mind has created a bowl of existence. You're sitting in the bottom of this bowl, and you can't see over the edge. You forgot, because Maya has two powers. The first one is forgetfulness. You forget that you were just enjoying the perfection of the day, and now you believe the day to be imperfect. There's a need. So your past is your attachment. Your past exists because it's a record of all of your attachments. Those things that would have just flown through the moment of life, come out of emptiness, appeared before you, and return to emptiness. That would be normal. That would be God. That would be how Ramakrishna is experiencing the day. But for us, one of those thoughts comes up grabs all its friends from the past and the samskaras, creates a sense of reality, and now you've got a desire, a sense of lack, right? A sense of needing something. You've forgotten that everything was perfect. And then the projection. You look out, you smell the pizza, that smells good. Ooh, it looks like it's good for food. Oh, it will bring me contentment. It will make me like God. And that triad of experience comes up. And then you suddenly need the idea of a future, right? Because you don't have your $20 bill here. Now you need time to run to the monastery, open that card, get back to the pizza joint so you can have your piece of pizza, right? And so you create a sense of future. You create a sense of past from your experience of the moment, bringing up your samskaras. And that creates a sense of lack from the moment. The sense of lack then requires a future so that you can make a plan to bring and manifest your desire in the moment. So you then run. So you see, that's where you're getting your ideas of past and future from. Your past is your attachments, your future is your desires. And most of us are just going boing, 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 boing. And what are we jumping over? Our fulfillment, our joy, our bliss, our love, our wonder at life. Jumping over it to go from our attachments to our desires, attachment to our desires, attachment to our desires. So anyway, you run to get your $20. So I ran to the monastery, didn't run, but I walked there, got my $20, great anticipation, hurried my way down Broadway and get to the pizza joint, and I buy my piece of pizza, and then I make the biggest mistake in life. I have that piece of pizza and I'm like, this is great. And the biggest mistake of life is that you think that the fulfillment of your desire made the day perfect. When you were already completely happy moments before you smelled pizza. But now you've blamed your happiness on an object, blamed your happiness on something outside of yourself. And you have doomed yourself to a life of slavery. Now you have to have a continual, unending flow of pepperoni pizza. If it can't happen. So, the next time you smell pizza, enjoy it and be happy. The beautiful smell of pizza.
Yeah, I have one question. The main point of your lecture was basically to have the awareness for a certain period of time, which is quite short. So I remember one of Swami Vivekananda's lectures where he was explaining about our thought cycle. So he says, between every thought, there is a very tiny, small gap of nothingness. So there we do not have any thought. But we cannot realize that. So by doing all these exercises, we can increase that gap in order to get the feeling of nothingness and this experience of spiritual awareness. So Swami Vivekananda also, he is teaching all the 4 yogas. The end point is basically samadhi. Samadhi is giving that realization of the spiritual awareness. So would you say that what you are talking is also the same as samadhi, but maybe a pre-samadhi, because it's only a tiny piece. If we are starting, sitting down and we get the presence of nothingness in a very tiny moment. But if you are getting it longer, and I think also Swami Vivekananda describes it, that what is concentration? Concentration, you can keep on so many seconds to one thought. What is a meditation? So many seconds you have to be able to concentrate, and then you enter samadhi. So is it that what you actually say or mean? But for that we cannot only sit down and think of nothing, but we have to have practice. So they say we have to do japam as a bhakta. We have to do the Raja Yoga, the meditation, all these kind of steps, these 8 steps. And what is your, personal experience and also your advice to reach this in a shortcut way?
Right. Well, that's the thing. The shortcut is to not buy into any story, not even the stories of the yogas. Just short circuit. Holy Mother herself says, you can have your realization this very moment if you want it. Right? Because we can't sincerely say that we want our realization this moment, mostly because we're not aware of all of this internal stuff that's going on, which is a problem only because we've brought it along on ourselves. So if you can just give that one grand renunciation, it can be instantaneous. There's no need for process. If you don't have that awareness, if you're lost in your hypnotization, then all the yogas come into play. The Raja Yoga, which is the one that you're talking about, with that space between thought. That is there. But we don't increase our length of samadhi, because samadhi has no length. Samadhi is outside of time. In you right now, like I said, you have the changing world, and you have samadhi. You have that part of you that is realized. It's the absolute unchanging, which is within, before mind. So you have developed within yourself already your realized self, your realized being. It is already there. But that realized being is perfectly content, perfectly still, demands no attention. It's not going to call you, it's not going to ring like a bell and say, hey, I'm over here. There's no movement, no sound, nothing. That's why that first time that we stepped outside of it to get a desire, we didn't know how to get back, because there was no indication. It's perfectly still, perfectly silent, perfectly holy. And it exists already. At this moment, your realized self is also there. But you haven't placed your awareness in that realized self. You've placed your source of awareness in the changing mind. And so you're stuck in the changing mind. And so all of the yogas are just trying to help you find a way to get back to some place that doesn't exist. Because it's just pure isness, pure being. It has no qualities. It doesn't rattle, it doesn't shine, or it shines, but it doesn't grab your attention. Your attention is focused, your awareness is focused on change. You can see that, you go, I saw that very poignantly one time. I was in Santa Barbara, which is a beautiful place, and I was on the beach, and I was watching this very grand sunset, very grand. There was this infinite ocean there, and I'm thinking, this infinite ocean, that's amazing. And this sun, this disk of burning fire in the sky that's billions of times bigger than I can imagine. And all of that, I'm just enthralled with this beauty. And then I see a McDonald's bag, an empty McDonald's bag, blow along the beach. And where does my mind go? From this infinite ocean and this beautiful sunset of this mysterious cosmic happening that's going on in front of me, to a blowing McDonald's bag, because we're interested in change. We don't pay any attention to what doesn't change, right? Which is why we look at the mind and the noise. The mind stays noisy because the noise is what gets our attention. Oh, look at that thought. Oh, look at that one. Wow, that's interesting. Like that. Yourself, the realized part of you, has no interest in those things. Has no need of those things. But because that part is so silent and so undemanding, you don't know where it is. And you're accustomed to looking for information. You're accustomed to looking for definition. You want to know how you're feeling today. Well, there's a reason you don't know how you're feeling today. Because you don't feel in that sense, right? But you still query. So you query the body. Oh God, I'm tired. Oh my knee is still hurting. And you go for that change. So if you either go to the body for it, or you go to the mind for it. Oh, I'm depressed. Oh, I'm so lonely. Oh my God, I'm so busy. Oh, I'm so anxious. All of those things. But very, very rarely do you not ask anybody. But go to the silence. And in the silence is where you'll find your perfection. In the silence is where you'll find your fulfillment and this wonderful, unchanging, steady flow of bliss. But you don't ask for that. You don't go there. You ask the body and you ask the mind, and they give you relational information, and you assume now you know something. But in fact, how you are is not something you have to ask any part or anything. It's what you are when nothing is telling you. So stop being told what you are. Stop listening to the mind for your solutions to your spiritual life. Stop listening to your thoughts telling you what the moment is. Just be perfect. Allow yourself to be unneeding. Believe by grace that you're already realized. And stay there. And watch all of the things rise and fall and laugh. Enjoy. Let it rise. Let it fall. The mind is only active because of your interest. The world is only dual because when you watch a thought, you become two. Right? If you're thinking, you're assuming you're two people. How so? Because the mind is saying something and somebody is listening to it. And you're both of those pieces. And yet somehow we think by thinking, we're going to get a solution when we're both the thinker and the listener. So what in the world do your thoughts have to tell you? What in the world do you think you will learn by being two people? You see, so this external world appears dual to you because you've created duality in your internal world. Stop the thinker. Be the witness. And the world will collapse. Just like in those old TVs before LCDs. Little white dot as a kid, watches and stays there for a second and then disappears. You truly will experience that in your meditation at some point. When you step outside and you experience that moment of silence, you'll suddenly realize that this world that you thought you were in is within you. And you'll watch this relativity collapse into itself because it only holds its shape because of its relationship with the absolute unchanging within you. You see, that's the secret of the relative world. It has no big or small without a comparison. And that absolute from which everything measures and finds its value is the absolute unchanging within you. If you step into that, the world that you thought you were in betrays itself to be within you. And because it's relative on its own, and you remove the absolute from it, and you're left in your samadhi, in your infinite bliss. That's why Vivekananda says, Alameda is not, I am not in Alameda. Alameda is in me. Alameda is a city in the Bay Area. I am not in Alameda. Alameda is in me. That's the final proof that the world, the universe, is merely a thought within your own mind. just like a dream. You know, dreams. If you contemplate dreams, you can learn all of the scriptures just from the experience of dreaming. You know, we complain about how hard renunciation is. Oh my God, how to renounce all kinds of things. Oh, it's going to be so difficult. Every single night you renounce everything about yourself. Before you go into that dream, you renounce everything. Your history, your job, your family, your body, your gender. All of it goes away in that wave of forgetfulness. And then Maya projects a dream. And in that dream, you are whatever you are for that dream. You take on a new set of memories, a new identity, a new body, perhaps, a new gender, perhaps. You take on a whole new story, and you have so utterly forgotten everything about your family, everything about your day at work, everything about your neighbors. The lawn no longer needs to be mowed. All of those things. And you take on a whole new existence. So renunciation is so natural to you. It's so easily done for yourself. You do it every day completely. So it's this, and then when you're in that dream, it's fascinating. It's just a mirror of this world with the same truths. In that dream, you'll see mountains that are hundreds of miles away, and yet they can't be farther than your ears are apart. You'll experience people. Twice I've had this wonderful experience of a lucid dream, not on purpose, it just happened. In one of them, I was in a yellow inner tube in the Monterey Bay, floating on the waves. And I was just floating on this inner tube, and just for somehow, some way, a voice came in my mind in the dream that said, "You're dreaming right now." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm dreaming." And being a computer person those days, because it happened before I was in the monastery. And I remember I was sitting there, and in the dream, because I was a computer programmer, I was fascinated with the resolution of everything. I started splashing in the water and watching it get caught on the hairs of my knuckle. And I was like, for crying out loud, look at that. My mind is able to generate all of that detail in real time, in the moment. And I remember looking up and seeing all this ice plant growing down the cliff, and I kind of paddled over there to get a closer look, and I could see the patches of dirt between the succulent petals of the ice plant and little pieces of soil and rocks. I was fascinated with that. But then the grand realization that woke me up actually was looking over, and I saw another yellow inner tube, and sitting in this yellow inner tube was this little girl, probably about 11 years old or something. And so I paddled over to look at the side of her face, because I saw this water droplet running down through the peach fuzz of her cheek. And I was like, no way, that's incredible. So I was just paddling over to look at that on her face. And when I got within a foot or two of her, she looks at me and she gets offended at me. "Get away from me, what are you doing?" And I looked at her in a moment of confusion. I was like, "Oh, what are you talking about? I created you? You're using my mind to exist? You're in my dream, and you have a sense of ego. You have a sense of separation from me." And boom, my head exploded. I laughed so hard I woke up laughing. And I laid there that night just staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I had just experienced. That I met another person in my own dream that thought that they existed separate and apart from me, and that they got offended by me being curious about them. And I was like, is it possible that this world is exactly like that? That we are all the dreamer. We're not the dreamed, but we've encapsulated ourselves in a little yellow inner tube, floating around through this experience, getting mad at each other, borrowing the same mind to exist in, borrowing the same I to create ourselves, placing ourselves within a dream of imagination, thinking it all to be terribly fascinating and real. And at that moment you wake up, renounced, not a care in your world, disappeared, all the meaning with it, all the anxiety with it, all the trouble with it, gone, unresolved, but disappeared in truth, dissolved in isness. Could it be that you're doing it right now? Not understanding that I'm your own self, giving you back the truth that you already know. But the game goes on. So have fun with it. Feel no stress. The dream always ends, and you're always set free.
So one of the major practices is also to have this witness attitude.
That's the final practice.
Yeah.
That practice is existent in all of the paths.
So when you were just telling about the story, you were sitting at the beach and seeing that wonderful sunset. Why you say it is wonderful? Because that is already a thought. We should actually not think it is wonderful. We should just experience it is there, and then as long as we do not have a thought, the more we will be probably overtaken by a feeling which we will feel inside. We may call it love or realization or something else. But we should not lose any thought of that, because then as soon as you think it is beautiful or you have to take a picture of that, that will be gone, that moment, isn't it?
Well, it's already gone.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
at that point, I mean, there's not realization in it. The trick is to look through it. You know, and the first thing is the idea of a should has to be eliminated. There's no should, there's only is. Right? Should assumes a past, assumes a future. So we don't use the word should. Just be. And let that sunset be. It's there. You're watching it. But you're not seeing what's there. To the extent that you see the beauty, you're seeing God. Right? God and beauty are synonyms. All of those words that don't have definitions are names of God. Truth, beauty, love, peace. These are all words that actually you can't define. That they get bigger the more you think about them, the more you sink into them, the deeper the meaning of them becomes. And yet they're all things that we know. This is what faith is. Faith is recognizing those parts of us which we were never taught, but innately know. Nobody has sat and taught you what love is. They couldn't. You know, love exists in so many different forms. Every single person alive is an existence of love and a story of love. No matter how heinous they may appear from our perspective, every person, Rama Vivekananda says, there's only one motivating factor in the universe, and that is divine love. So every person is a story of love, right? And so to understand what love is, you have to take every person that's ever lived and look at their life and add it together, and you would approach an understanding of love that way. So the thing is to come into the isness of it. Yes, you're true. As soon as you have a thought, you're in time-space causation. But if you're paying attention to the senses, which is what a sunset is, you're already in time-space causation. And so having already made that mistake and having made it unconsciously, you know, you're in it already. So the thing to do is to look through it. Look through it and understand beauty. How do I know what that is? Nobody ever had to teach me what beauty was. I never had to write an essay on what is beauty. Although it would be a fascinating essay to write. You see these qualities, so look through everything. That's what becoming aware is. It's understanding that nothing is there, and trying to find the essence of what is pulling you toward it. Everything you desire in this world, everything that you want, is a name of God. Knowing that, look for the name of God in it. That's what discernment is about. Discernment is putting your desire on a pedestal Not touching it, not running after it, putting your hands behind your back and just walking a slow circle around it saying, what is it that this is reflecting back to me? What is the quality that I think this thing possesses that makes me want it? And if you look close enough and long enough at every single one of your desires, the name of God will come out of it. Go for that. The object was only reflecting it. Go for that. And that will take you deep inside. Because the source of beauty is almost unfathomably deep within you. The source of love, the knowledge of love, natural to you, is unfathomably deep within you. It has nothing to do with people, genders, bodies, senses. They're only reflecting something through the light of consciousness itself. So look at your desires. Don't be afraid of them. There's nothing to fear. Even if you get trapped and run after them, you'll still find freedom one day. No one's being hurt. No one is suffering. Nothing is wrong. God is everywhere present and always perfect. Remembering that will lead you to the soul, because nothing is ever perfect for the body, and nothing is ever perfect for the mind. To find that perfection, you have to know who is looking for it, who has imagined that it is not already present because of mind, because of body identifications. So my practice right now is finding that spark, when a desire hasn't quite bloomed into a state of mind, hasn't become the bowl complete with all of its samskaras, memories, and projections. Before that, it starts just as a spark with hardly any meaning at all to you. But by studying your desire, watching it form, watching it go through the whole process, watching the grabbing, all of that, when you bring it up, when you see that desire form, let it get in. It's better not to let it fully form into a bowl. At that point, you're pretty much just going to fulfill it because there's not much of a way out at that point. You're overcome already. So that's why we go inside with awareness, so that we become aware of our desires before they bloom, before they become a state of mind. See them in their initial spark. And when that first spark happens, you smell that first thing of pizza and the thought of a pizza appears in your mind. At that point, that's the awareness that we have to develop so that we catch these things before we're lost in them, catch them before they happen, before they become a problem. And look at, there's a desire. And when you see that desire, that first spark, look at everything going on inside. How does your body feel? There's always a constriction when the spark of a desire appears. There's always a tightening, right? That's why Vivekananda says all expansion is life, all contraction is death. Right? Death is body identity. If you believe yourself to be the body, you suffer death. If you know yourself not to be the body, you laugh all the way through. That's the difference. According to Nisargadatta, that's the difference between a saint and a sinner. The sinner leaves the world weeping, and the saint leaves the world laughing. So in the Bible it says the wages of sin is death. What is sin? Sin is believing you're separate and apart from God, that you're identified by a body and mind. If you believe that, you will suffer death. As you watch your body die, because you identified with it, you will think, I'm dying. And all of the horror and fears of death will surround you, and you will believe yourself to be dying, and you will suffer death. Horrible fear of a non-existence, which is the utter opposite of what you are. And that's the reward of sin, as they call it. Really, sin is just your identification with the temporal, the body-mind. But if you know, I'm not the body. So let me finish that thought before I go into new things. So when you see that spark, and you see it come up, first, pay attention to the way that it affects you, because that itself will be enough to snuff it out when you realize, I feel that. I feel the pain already coming. I feel the suffering of need already coming. I feel the strain of having to search and grab and acquire already pulling me off of my peace, pulling me out of my silence, right? So look at it very closely. And then when you've got a good sense of how it feels in you, when you've got a good sense of how it's put together and how it's composed, renounce it simply by saying, first, sorry. After you've done that, the very next thing is suss it out. Is this coming from mind or is this coming from body? Because all of your desires arise from either body or the mind. No desire arises from the self. The self is content. So identify it, body or mind. It's always one of the two. And when you know, and you've crystallized it, and it's standing there in front of you, make your statement, I'm not the body. And walk away. I'm not the mind. And be free. And you'll find with practice that will happen faster and more quickly and more efficiently every time. And the desires won't pull you out of your peace. They won't make you forget your beloved. That love inside. That love manifests in the presence. It's not a thing in and of itself. It's a result of presence. You know, when you are in your meditations, if you feel love, oh my goodness, don't go after it. You know, understand all sensations are unreal. Stay in your center and allow it to grow. And allow it to grow, and allow it to grow, until it overwhelms the mind, overwhelms the senses, and results in samadhi. You're breaking from the temporal. And then past that, I don't know much. Don't know anything actually, but it's an embracing of the whole. You see that all of it is one. There weren't two at all. But you had to suss out your existence in order for that to happen.
So you give an example with this pizza story. That you had a sense of fullness, and then the desire came in because of the smell, and then this whole chain of events. And now what you just said is how to prevent that. What would you say to people where they're not coming with a sense of fullness and completion, which you already had, but from a sense of emptiness and perhaps even depression, where there's a lack of motivation to do anything, leave alone desire anything? What would be the path for them?
Bhakti. Remind yourself of the presence of God. Remind yourself of grace. Through just thinking about grace, you know, will take you to the feet of truth. You know, just accepting it. Can you possibly believe that somebody has given you freedom from your depression? You know, for me, I was diagnosed in 2008 with severe depression while I was in the monastery, which was a rather tumultuous thing to face. They put me on drugs, and I took my drugs for a year, and I felt like a horrible hypocrite. I felt like, how can I possibly be a monk and be dependent on a drug for my happiness? And so I knew that I couldn't stay on that medicine, but I trusted the doctors, and I looked at Thakur. Thakur took all of his medicines, obeyed the physicians, so I obeyed my physicians. But I knew in my mind this was not the solution. And the thing that was most helpful for me for dealing with depression was understanding that depression belonged to my mind, and understanding that I'm not the mind. And so I stopped saying the words, I'm depressed. And I started to say, I'm looking through a depressed mind. And that doesn't seem like much help, but it gave me a lot of help, because that little bit of distance was enough for me to say, I can make a choice here. I can understand that I'm looking through a depressed mind, but not identify with it. Let myself be as I am, looking through a depressed mind, and not be controlled by it. So to hold that space, and to draw close to my beloved, who is on this side of mind with me. And I often, quite frequently, always, let's just say always. The mother is always there, on my shoulder, because Swami Prabhupada told me something very important one time. He says all of the knots of Maya will untie themselves in the light of awareness, right? And so if we don't have that awareness in ourselves as our own, because of delusion, then we have Mother. And so you let Mother sit right next to you, and you put your mind in your hand, whatever condition your mind is in, whatever trouble is there, put it in your hand, let it be whatever it is. And just look at it with the awareness of you and Mother sitting there looking at this mind together. You know? And I remember one of the times that I did this, it was a beautiful moment for me. Because I sat there looking at this mind at that point I was, dealing a lot with, well, let's not get specific. Dealing a lot with any number of the wonderful things that can take our idea of self. Sitting there looking at it, and I remember telling Mother as we were looking at it, because I had still some identity, we were still looking at my mind together. We weren't looking at Mother's mind. So we're looking at my mind. And I'm sitting there, we're looking at it, and I told Mother, I said, Mom, I said, if this was your mind, you would feel exactly the same way that I'm feeling. And I in my own mind, a very funny thing happened. Mother looked at me with such a sense of purpose and pushed me on the shoulder in a playful way and nodded. That's all you have to know. I am you looking through your mind. There is no you here. There's only me and that mind. And you have assumed there's a third thing called you. But I'm the one living all of these lives. I'm the one watching all of these lives. You are the non-existent byproduct. Let go. Let go. Don't worry. You see, it's our interest in our problems that perpetuate them. We own them. And then we become identified with them. We carry them with us like little ID cards. Oh, I'm depressed. Oh, I'm straight. Oh, I'm gay. Or I'm not sure what I am. We take on all these little identities and then we just put them in our wallet. And anytime somebody asks you what you are, you pull out your wallet. Oh, look, I'm a man. I'm an American. Oh, I'm a blonde. Oh, I'm an Indian. We come up with all these things. Stop it. Somebody says, who are you? I don't know. I'm just going on. Somebody says, how are you? I don't know. I can tell you about my body. You want to hear about my body? I can tell you all about it. Oh, my mind? You want my mind? I can tell you how it is. How I am? Silence. Peace. Love, awareness, I don't know. How are those things? I think they're self. They are. Whatever that means, I don't even know what that means. That's the funny thing, existence, which is something so fundamental. Please tell me what it is. Please tell me what it means to exist. Some of my highest ascents to bliss so far have just come by contemplating existence. All the paths are just one of Satchit and not Satchit and Ananda. You take any one of those three, that Ananda is Bhakti Yoga, that Sat is Raja Yoga, Chit is Jnana Yoga. Any of them. Just by knowing that you're not the body, becoming comfortable, changing your vocabulary. You're allowed to say three things about yourself. I exist. That's true. I'm loving. That's true. I'm wise. I'm intelligent. That's also true. I'm angry. No, that belongs to the mind. Don't use the word I with anger. The mind is angry. Don't forget that. So change your vocabulary. Oh, I'm sick. No, you're not. The body is sick. Change your vocabulary. Stop hypnotizing yourself that you are sick. You are happy, you are sad, you have this, you have three things you can say about yourself. Anything else is a bald-faced lie. Right? Those are qualities of body, qualities of mind. So continually, with practice, regularity, assign them to their appropriate places and remind yourself in that moment, I'm not the body and I'm not the mind, so I'm not going to take care of that problem, it's not my problem. And just through the disinterest, which comes through just being aware of the truth, that awareness itself will untangle it. You don't need to solve it. You don't need to come up with a future with a nice long plan that puts your ego in charge, because the ego is the one that makes the boundaries, defines the problems, and gives you the solution, and sets you on the course of time-space causation. Don't let all of that happen. Become aware of the problem. Realize that it's not yours, it belongs to the body or the mind, and move on. Sit with Mother. And just that awareness, because it is not your nature to be angry, it is not your nature to be mean, to be selfish, it is not your nature to steal, to hurt, to wound. And so by simply naming it, becoming aware of it, your nature itself will heal it. Because it's not what you want. The worst thing you can do is to call yourself a sinner, to call yourself evil, to call yourself impure, to call yourself anything different from what you are. Such a pain is born through that identity. Such a burden is formed by trying to carry something that doesn't belong to you like that. So stop it. Don't lie. Right? So attach your eye to only those three things. Right? Everything else is something else. Be aware. Give it to Mother. And go play.
About Karma Bhakti and Raja Yoga, you will find big amounts of literature.
Yes.
Jnana Yoga maybe also, but what we just said is the witness attitude. Is it more linked to Jnana Yoga? Because the basic idea is neti, which means not this, not this.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to reject everything unless we feel touched, that there is reality within us. Is that?
Well, that's two different. The neti is backing in to Mother, or your idea of the infinite. Any idea is a particular. It doesn't fully describe you, if it describes you at all. And so neti is just backing into Mother, because God is the one looking. God is the one asking. God is the one wondering. So God cannot objectify himself. It's like your face. If you're going to study your face, what are you going to study? How are you going to tell me about your face? You've never seen it. Oh, I looked in the mirror. No, it's not your face. That's a reflection of your face. So you can't see that which you are. That's why we do neti. If you're running after something, what in the world are you running after? You're the one running after it. How will you ever catch it? You'll never catch something you're chasing. You'll never be something you've objectified. You can't be anything that's on the other side of the senses. You can't be anything that you think. You're the one watching your thoughts. How can they be you? So all of the paths are really that. The neti, it's jnana, it's going through and keeping that. But in a sense, bhakti also portrays the same thing, but just in a very different way. You know, in bhakti, love becomes everything. The bhakti is unique, and that's why Thakur says it's the fastest and most efficient path, because the path and the goal are the same. Love is what you're practicing, and love is what you're after. So they merge. You know, and so in that meditation, it's interesting, in your meditation, you've got your two objects, right? You've got your chosen ideal that you're sitting with and worshiping in the shrine, and you're sitting there in that shrine. So you've got you, who you don't know who you are. So you've got an imagined concept of I sitting in the shrine. You've got God, that you don't know who that is, what that is, sitting in the same shrine. So you've got two untruths sitting there in relationship with each other, right? But what happens in bhakti, interestingly enough, we have this idea, oh, you merge in God. Well, how can you say that? You don't know what God is, you don't know what you're worshiping. What actually happens is that between this unknown self and this unknown God, in that relationship of contemplating pure love, pure bliss, pure existence, pure grace, in that, the two of them merge in the love that forms between them. And that love is the real. And that love includes both this sense of you, the material world, the changing world, and the absolute unchanging, the ideal of God. The two of them come together and merge in as yet an unknown third, which is that love that forms between you, that thing, that love that binds multiplicity into a singularity. And that's why we don't all have to start marching the same way in order to be lovers of God. We have a multiplicity, a diversity, an expression, multiple expressions of one ideal, but it's the love that makes us see the oneness in that diversity. So we don't have to become fascists to realize God. We don't have to demand everybody to have the same thought and the same religion and the same ideals and the same this or that. We have to see the seed of love that is in each one of us and look at that and understand that. And then that will grow and give us a sense of oneness regardless of how different we are, regardless how odd everyone is. The strangeness of ideas. Yeah, I think I think that's the next class. Bhakti investigate. Yeah, anyway, I'll better look that up. But that's the whole idea: is how to be a jnani as a bhakta. You know, because it is difficult, because in the way that jnana presents itself, it kind of undoes your bhakti. You know, how can I love something that's not there? Right. But so you have to see the coding, the code words that jnanis use to describe God. Buddhism is full of God. You know, even Buddhists have this notion that God's not there. Then they'll turn around and talk to you about Buddha nature. You know, you're like, wait, what is Buddha nature? And we'll get into that. You know, I have a whole page of Buddhist quotes where they betray God, but just use different words for it, so that you can be very comfortably not thinking about God. So it's how to do that. That's the fun of it, though.
Leonard, you said that you in the beginning just did 2 minutes meditation a day, morning and evening.
Yeah.
And how do you now, after all your experience, think that your idea for coming from inside to outside to be a jnani, for just 1 second perhaps, could it really nourish you this much that the whole day you were nourished enough, or is it the way from outside to inside? The whole day it is dualism, and the end it will come at that moment. But you really think you had the power that this 1 second has nourished you for the whole day? Or how you served the swamis or like that?
Yeah, and I don't frame it that way. What's happened is my life has become practice.
Mm-hmm.
There's no separation. And so it's not that any period of anything has given me a nourishment for a day or for time. It's that source of nourishment has become my day. And so I'm never separate from it. I'm always being aware of the fact that all of this is a pretty amazing illusion of my own self. I did a practice for a while where I would look in the mirror at my face, and I would look into my own eyes, and I would stare into my own eyes, which were outside of myself, right? And then holding that image of my own eyes, I would simultaneously become aware of what is behind those eyes within me. And so I made a practice of being able to switch from viewing outside to viewing inside, viewing outside, viewing inside, to get an understanding that what I'm seeing outside is a description of what's going on inside. And trying to look not at the face in the mirror, not at the eyes in the mirror, but looking through the face, through the eyes, to the self that's looking out. And using that practice then when I look at you, or when I look at you, or when I look at that. And all the things that I know and feel about those things are not coming from that thing. Everything that I've ever thought about the outside world was originating here, which means that my lover was not the source of the love that I enjoyed. That those mountains are not the source of the beauty that I enjoy, because I've understood everything that I am putting out there has its effect coming from in here. And so you learn to live with that awareness. Again, it's just an awareness of a pre-existent truth.
But then when this awareness is so strong, why you are coming out from meditation and you are not always in that state of unity? What makes you coming out?
Coming out where?
From the state that I'm in the... You described for just 1 second, you feel the unity, the awareness.
Oh, you don't?
The light or...
Yeah, for me...
Anyway, we are coming out.
Yeah, I'm an amateur, first of all. Don't get the idea that I'm Jesus telling you these truths. But the fact is, there's no coming out of that.
Okay.
There's no difference from that. You become my meditation. Talking to you becomes my prayer. The way I treat you becomes my prayer. It's like that. My conversation with the clerk behind the cashier at the grocery store. When I first started that practice, I would get myself worked up for it while I was in line. I was like, okay, remember, this is Thakur that I'm going to be addressing. And so when I got there, I would pay very close attention to that person. I would look through their eyes and do that awareness. Everything that I'm seeing there is coming from here. And so I would talk to her like I was talking to Thakur. I would address her like I would address Thakur. And that changed the whole world for me. Because when I talked to her with that sense of honor, that sense of respect, that sense of love, her response to me was not as a cashier. Her response to me was very personal, very wonderful, in that sense. And so I started to make that my practice, take away the fear of separation. She's not going to think anything of me, and that way, literally your life, you see the one fact of being aware is coming to the notion that life is your prayer. And God answers every prayer with a yes. He never says no. Your no's, the thing that we mistake as a no from God, is the fact that we are not aware of our entire prayer. You'll say, "Oh, I want to lose weight." God, please let me lose some weight. But then when you sit down, you have 3 pieces of cake for dessert. That also is a prayer. You're asking God for the effect of 3 pieces of cake. So he'll take your prayer for being thin, and he'll take your prayer for having 3 pieces of cake, and he'll give you a yes to the summation of those 2 things. So that's why Mother says, this very moment you can have your realization if you want it. You're not even aware of what you want. You're not even paying that much attention inside. Become aware of what you want, so that your prayer becomes a singular focus of what it is you're really searching for. And when you've come to that singular thing that you want, bring that and ask for it. And you'll feel that yes to the bottom of your toes. You know? But as it is, we ask for a billion things in a day, all of them contradictory, all of them against each other, some of them line up, right? But through that practice of awareness, you become aware of what you want.
And you stopped praying also?
No. Prayer became everything. I pray all the time.
But when everything comes from inside, there is no need for any prayer.
No, there's never been a need for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are, we're playing.
Mm-hmm.
I play with the divine because the divine is the highest ideal imaginable. There's nothing, that's the thing. Thakur says some people aren't interested in being sugar.
Mm-hmm.
They want to taste sugar. And in this world, Thakur says that for the ordinary person, you can't really become sugar in this world. It's not really a power given to the ordinary person. So I just enjoy sugar. I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy serving. I enjoy allowing manifestation. I try as much as possible not to imagine a situation or to imagine a series of behaviors or a series of actions. I try to stay right here in the moment and understand that everything that comes to me is perfect, that this moment is exactly as it should be. I have no need to change it. Regardless, if my body hurts, then I just become aware, oh, that's the body hurting. That's part of the dream. The body is not who I am. And that neuters the pain. I remember I broke my leg, I don't know how many years ago that was now, but boy, that hurt. And I had to lay there on that bed in the monastery, no TV, no radio, no visitors, just laying there hurting. And I had to think, what do I do with this? And I realized that if I sit there and think, oh my God, I hurt, my leg hurts, oh my God, this pain is horrible, I identified with it. I became one with it. There was no escape. That pain was horrible. But when I started doing that practice of okay, well, where is that pain coming from? Really, do you know? And the odd thing is you don't know. This, how far to go with these things. But I remember one time laying in bed and feeling the weight of the sheets on the top of my toes as I'm laying there in bed. And I laid there and I asked myself, I said, how do you know that's your toe? That's feeling that, And I began sitting there thinking, I was like, feeling doesn't have a geolocation. I assign it that. I cross-reference, so my eyes see my foot, my eyes see the sheet, and so I say, oh, that pain or that sensation is coming from my toe. But if you sit there with your eyes closed, in your sense of being, sensations don't come from places. They just are. And you're always the one watching them. They're never you. And when you think that, even when you're sick, if you could get that mentality, your sickness drops in its effect on you. Just simply with that understanding, let alone actually doing the separation and knowing. Because I like Swami Trigunatita, when he was in San Francisco, he went to the dentist, right? The dentist was going to give him Novocaine, and Swami Trigunatita was like, oh no, I don't need that. Just give me a moment. And he withdrew his mind, withdrew his sense of self from his body. And the dentist went in there and did all that work without any Novocaine. He went back to the dentist the second time. The dentist just immediately went in there because he thought he didn't need anything, and Trigunatita screamed, ah! And the dentist was confused, like, oh, I thought you didn't need Novocaine. He says, I don't, but I have to withdraw myself. I have to withdraw the mind from it. I've got to come into that state of knowledge, that understanding, and then you can do it. And so he did it again, and then the dentist did his thing. So we get a hint on how it works there. You withdraw your sense of self from the body, and the pain will diminish to the extent that you're able to do that. It happens all the time. Teenagers are masters at not hearing their mother, right? Sitting there. It's easy to ignore the things you don't want to hear or see. Just make it a practice. Choose the things you want to hear and see by returning to the self. And the more adept you become at knowing who you are, the less the world will affect you. forget to enjoy it. Don't let it become a should or a have to or a work. Always let it be a truth. This is. Let me see the isness of it. Don't try and get there. If you try and get there, you're lost. You're involved in a story. The ego's in charge. Ignore all stories. Accept the gift. That's the thing. Accept grace. Accepting infinite grace requires infinite humility. You have to understand you can't do this. You cannot realize God. You cannot change your habits. You cannot do anything. Why? Tapo tells you very quickly in the gospel, at least 100 times, you are not the doer. If you're not the doer, how are you going to do anything? Mother asks for total surrender because the state of total surrender is the reality. You're just a witness, the observer of God. By grace, you're being allowed to watch this play of pure love. By grace, you're allowed to borrow God's existence, God's love. You see, God is the noun. God is love. God is intelligence. God is existence. God is not loving. God is love itself. God does not exist. God is existence. God is not intelligent. God is intelligence itself. We are the Shakti. We are the expression. I am loving. I'm not love itself. I am intelligent. I'm not intelligence itself. I exist. I'm not existence itself. And that's very important to know that, because then you will understand that God has never been separate from you. If God was to withdraw existence from you, you would just go away instantly. If God pulled love out of you, you would not exist anymore. If God pulled intelligence out, you would never grow or change. You would never learn. And so the mere fact that you're here, the mere fact that you can recognize and express love, the mere fact that you can grow and learn, that is your love letter from the Beloved. His promise, I will never leave you. Until you know that, you practice faith. Put the training wheels on. Until you start to recognize that there's some things you can only possibly know because you came into this world with them. The idea of immortality. Nothing in this world could have taught you. We shouldn't even know that word. We should have no idea of immortality. We've never seen it. There's nothing anywhere immortal. And yet we're very comfortable with it. And all ideals are like that. We've never seen a perfect anything. So how do we have an idea of perfection if you didn't bring it with you? Your immortality, your perfection, your infinity, all of your ideals. We brought them into this world with you. This world can teach you nothing about any of them, let alone you becoming them.
I think